I'm here in a little town called CADIZ, Kentucky. And this is basically where a group of people come together in a hateful minded way that they was going to stomp, romp, and tromp all over my rights simply because of me being within about 15 miles from here, just across from the Cumberland River, in an area called Land Between the Lakes. I have never seen a town that was so divided as I have with CADIZ, because CADIZ, Kentucky, if you walk the streets and look around, they want to promote this image of 1880s, basically the same thing as Patty's over in Grand Rivers, Kentucky. And a lot of these little areas up here in Kentucky are very, very antiquish. They hold to their traditional values. They have never truly let go of the old. Okay? In which there's nothing wrong with that to a certain extent. But whenever you let the old dominate the present, that it's affecting the future, then is whenever you got a problem. And usually it's simply because of various people in various towns, regardless whether it's in Kentucky or Tennessee or wherever, that basically has old money, and they have long-term influences, and they're looked up to because of their wealth or their successes, and because of it, nobody wants to buck the system, and they want to be respectful to these people because they do have deep pockets. And that's one reason why that the old dominates the present towards affecting the future, is because of these people that want to hang on to these old values that was primitive probably within 25 years after they started wanting to notoriously continue to keep these values. And because of it, it has stained or hurt or brought a stagnation into the growth of their town. A matter of fact, here in Trigg County, Kentucky, at one time they used to have some major industrial factories here. Just one factory alone was like 5,000, another factory 1,500, another factory 600, and in total they had like a dozen factories here at one time that was hopping and popping and going and blowing, and it had to have been making all kinds of tax revenue for the county seat and for the city of CADIZ, because this is basically where everything thrives at in this particular county. You would think that a courthouse as elaborate as this one right here is that I'm looking at, it's basically, I guess it's probably 3 stories, maybe 4. You would think that this place would have a jail in it, and maybe they do now, but in 2012, whenever they went all the way out to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to pick me up, I was actually housed in Christian County, the next county over, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Where did the money go to raise the proceeds to being able to have their own jail? I mean, if you can build an elaborate courthouse like this is not anything like courthouses that I see in Tennessee. Obviously, somebody must have had some influences or some pull somewhere just to be able to build something like this. I mean, there's a big balcony. If you look right there, there's a big balcony. And I'm pretty sure they probably have their town hall, whatever, voting sessions here. I've never been to any of them. But I'm pretty sure that they're pretty open with their politics of what they do and how they do it and who they're going to do it with and who they're going to do it to. And it's a cliquish It's cliquish, very, very cliquish. And that's what you'll find in a lot of these areas, regardless whether it's CADIZ or Hopkinsville or Paducah, Kentucky, or Grand Rivers or Calvert City or Mayfield, Kentucky, that recently just got through hit by a tornado, or Murray, Kentucky. They're very cliquish, and they favor to various people that they like. And if they don't like you, you basically aren't even safe of being out on the streets. Because whenever these little towns roll up their sidewalks, somebody like me that's still out here kind of sticks out like a you-know-what in a toilet bowl. And because of it, I have just recently been told on the telephone that I needed to get the heck out of here, that it could actually be looked upon as being not provocative, but provoking these people in regards towards what has happened in the past with Land Between the Lakes and L.B.L. officials. And whenever it reaches the point in America that we no longer feel welcomed, even though we may not be part of the flock as far as their reservation, Indian reservations. Whenever it gets to the point that we're paranoid in not feeling welcomed and maybe even being attacked because of our very presence, then is whenever a little town like CADIZ, Kentucky, has taken it entirely too far. Now, if anybody knows anything about the Civil War at all, that CSA, I think, represents that, because it talks down there on the bottom, in memory of the Confederacy soldiers of Trigg County. And then if you look up there, it talks about 1861 to 1865, that my great-great-great-great-grandfather fought in, and one of them actually got wounded in war pertaining to the Confederacy. Okay, I'm still observing this, looking at it. In and of itself is a beautiful monument. I believe I would want to come out here and sandblast it, or at least take maybe a high pressure washer to it to try to clean it up and make it look back halfway new again, like it used to be. But they've got some other things here I want you to observe towards where we are. Location: 22 courthouses in Kentucky burned during the Civil War. And I'm assuming this right here was the area right here of those that got burnt in this area. Okay, that's kind of neat. It's historical. It talks about the history and a little bit about their past of various sacrifices that various people had to make during the time in all of this that was going on, not only in other parts of the South, but right here in Kentucky. Walk over here and I look around. I see another monument over here. I love the feel pertaining to their antiquish, old look that they promote. This here talks about some things here. Let me see if I can hit this real quick where you can read a little bit about this. Now let's go around to the front. And let's look at the front, which I guess basically says the same thing. Right there. And I'm going to let it stand still for a second. Let me see. Trigg County, Virginia, came to Kentucky as a member of the Court Land Commissioner 1779, settled 1780. Virginia, active in Justice of the Peace for the first County Court, 1781. Trigg Battle of Blue Lake, August 1978. Trigg County Forum, Caldwell, and Christian. Which once more, Christian County is just right across the road here, or across the county line here. This is another historical monument that they got here. This one here you can't make out, but it does talk about in memory of those in Trigg County who made the Supreme of World War I. This is their World War I memorial. And probably somewhere they've probably got another memorial that probably represents the World War II veterans. I'm assuming that they do. It's not right here on the front of the streets. I don't know where they come up with their theory or their, I guess you'd call it like a slogan or something pertaining to all the pigs. But they got pigs everywhere in this town. And whenever I say everywhere, they're statue pigs. Some of them are painted in different colors. Hey, what are y'all out doing?
Walking it off.
Are y'all from around here?
Yeah.
Do you know any of the history here in Trigg County?
No, not really.
Do you not?
I'm new.
So you wasn't born here?
No, neither one of us.
You wasn't born here, okay.
No, it's,
How long you been here?
a few years.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just kind of moseying through, and I'm a historian, and I like to document various things that I come across. And I was just wondering what all the pigs represent. Could you tell me about the pigs?
A lot of this was like hog. It was like a big hog farm around here.
This was a big hog farm.
Yeah, there's a lot of big, like there was a lot of big plantations and like hog farms. This was all like farmers' land.
I got you.
Way back when, you know.
I see.
Ruby, come here.
And the way I understand it, that it used to be very highly motivated pertaining to industrial. Used to have a lot of big factories here, correct?
Yeah, iron for like.
Oh, the iron thing. Oh,
Yeah.
that
Like-
road.
Like
I know
iron,
the road.
old coal burning iron furnaces.
Well, but there's also a lot of modern factories around here. I mean, one factory is like 5,000 laborers, another factory like 1,500 laborers.
Oh yeah.
But now a lot of those factories, the way I understand it, have shut down.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, mean, the factories I do see, I don't ever see cars at.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you happen to know where their World War II memorial is?
I think it's the park, down by the park they do a reenactment.
Okay. And that's open for the public?
Yeah.
But
And,
they
it
only
ain't
do
World
it,
War
like, one-
II, it's Civil War.
Okay.
They do a Civil War reenactment.
All the stuff here is basically talking about their town, of when it was started. It goes all the way back, 800 men in 1864. I mean, there was some other stuff I was reading over there, like goes back to like 1771.
Yeah, I think the courthouse has been burned down about 5 times.
It has.
Yeah.
That much trouble here pertaining to disturbances?
Yeah,
People
like,
having different opinions and
yeah, Civil War, from 1770 something, it was burned down, and then 1864, I think, it was burned down, and World War, the Civil War, it was burned down.
well, how come they don't have a jail here?
I heard they used to, but
They bring everyone to
From Christian County.
Christian
Yeah.
County, yeah.
I think so.
But it's a small town. There's not really that many people here.
Do you know Judge Woodall?
No, I don't.
You don't know him?
I've never been inside the courthouse, so
No, yeah, me neither.
we stay out of trouble. So we don't. We walk by it and wave. That's about it. We don't
I
go
hear you.
inside.
The less said, the better, huh?
Yes.
That's right.
Absolutely. Hey, good talking to y'all.
I want to say.
Let me walk on down here for a second. It's amazing how people don't want to change. And once more, I respect the dead. I respect history. I respect the things that has occurred in historical events and moments, not only here in America, but throughout other parts of the world, of the grief and the suffering and the sacrificing that various people has had to make. I have no idea what they're talking about in regards to a park. I thought it was right up here, but I think that I think that I am lost to the point that I really don't know where the park is. I'm going down here a little bit further. I do want to show my viewers this antique store here that is kind of unique in different ways. I don't know who the store belongs to, but this is what they thrive off of, pertaining to their ancient look, nostalgia towards various things that obviously they're proud of out here. One of the things that caught my eye whenever I was out here looking around was this horse right here that I kind of found to be very, very cool looking. Somebody has taken off one of its legs. I'm sure that could be replaced. But the artwork and what that they have done here is absolutely exquisite. There was another piece of art over here that I found to be very unusual, which was somebody on a motorcycle. It wasn't the actual motorcycle, but it was what was on the front of the motorcycle that caught my eye, in somebody taking a wood structure and making this look like what it looks. Now, you know good and well whoever done that had to be very, very artistically inclined, and they had to spend a great deal of time just to make that. Especially if you spend as much time with it as that right there. That was probably hewn from one log, I'm assuming. But this one here that really caught my eye was the eagle. Very, very transparent. But look at the wolf, the werewolf. The wolf that come at me in 1989 that tried to stop me from me doing what I was doing before Land Between the Lakes ever become a national park in the sense towards the people that's in charge of it today. Wasn't in charge of it in 1989, but become in charge year 2000. You may be saying, well, who was in charge before 2000? It was the TVA. The TVA people that initially built the dam, not just that dam, but in total like 20 or 30 dams. They was the ones that was in control of Land Between the Lakes. A peninsula that has a body of water around three sides, and the other side connects into the state of Tennessee, going over the state border in the regard towards part of the National Federal Park is in Kentucky. The biggest bulk of it is in Kentucky. And then there's another part in Tennessee, down by Piney Campground, pretty close to Paris Landing. This place, in and of itself, I know is a good place. Regardless whether they got one pig or 1,000 pigs, in honor of multiple pig farms that obviously help put CADIZ, Kentucky on the map. Just on the other side of the river, Cumberland River, is where you will find Land Between the Lakes. And then on the other side of the Tennessee River is where you will find the little area called Aurora, Kentucky. It's pretty obvious. These people are very patriotic. They got red, white, and blue everywhere. Matter of fact, it's an exception to the rule by seeing that much red, white, and blue in one particular store. Okay, bear with me, please, if you don't mind. I'm trying to get somewhere with my story, and I know sometimes it takes me a while to get to what I'm trying to talk about, and there's a purpose for me talking about various things before I actually get to the main topic of what I want to talk about. This courthouse right here that has been built several different times is the very courthouse that I was tried in after making 2 telephone calls that, to my knowledge, was in regards towards freedom of speech, because I had already went through the process of going through a violation period, our process with the Paducah, Kentucky officials. I had already went through a process in regards towards the federal judge up in Paducah, Kentucky, in regards to Land Between the Lakes. But then, suddenly, I was engaged in another event that put me to where I am today, towards basically being obese and them trying to institutionalize me by saying that I was not fit, or that was their concept, not fit to be out into the eyes of society because I was considered either a harm to myself or a harm to others. You got to look through the lines here towards what was their motives. How come they spent so much time in trying to dogmatic this person out in regards towards trying to make him out to be either a monster or make him out to be somebody that was a lunatic that needed to be put in a rubber room somewhere and put on high doses of psychiatric medication? What was driving them? What was motivating them in trying to destroy this individual's life that I'm talking about right now pertaining to myself? Well, I feel like that one reason why is because I spent too much time with them up here. You know, whenever you spend over a year living like a wild man out in the woods, people are going to get to thinking that maybe you really are a wild person. Maybe you are somebody that's been touched because of you going into the various woodses and praying and being seen only at different times and basically living like a primitive person. I like to use Jeremiah Johnson for one of my examples because I know that people like Jeremiah Johnson and Daniel Boone, David Crockett, and other people like that spend a great deal of time in outdoor activity because at that time that was the proper thing to do. So naturally, because it's not the proper thing to do in today's society in the year 2022, people frown, freak out, or judge people like myself because I'm a bit different. I'm a bit odd. I don't really, what you would call, fit in towards being the norm. A matter of fact, I was in Tiptonville, Tennessee, around Reelfoot Lake, just a few days ago, Sunday. I had my automobile parked at the Dairy Queen, gonna go in and get a banana split, and I could tell that an audience around my automobile had basically was created to the extent that whenever I come out after eating my banana split, I heard somebody say, "Oh yeah, that's the weirdo car." Weirdo car. You know, I went ahead and I got in my car and I didn't say nothing. But I'm going to tell you exactly what I thought. I thought to myself, you know, you can have all these elaborate paint jobs with skulls and crossbones. You can have all these elaborate paint jobs of various cartoon characters or maybe Budweiser, or now they got these kits that you can put on your car and basically put any kind of image on your truck or on your car, as long as you got the money to pay for it and the time to stick it on there, that you can make your automobile almost look like any graphic design, digital, artistical form that you want, that you desire. And I guarantee you that same group of people, if they was looking at an automobile, truck or car that had these markings that I'm talking about on my particular automobile, rather than have love and all the 10 Commandments and you know, being a patriot towards representing the United States military, I guarantee you they'd be standing around that automobile oohing and ahhing. Oh, isn't that nice? Oh, look at that. Oh, look at how that sparkles. Oh, look at the design on that. You know why? It's just like Jesus said, sinners love sinners. Birds of a feather flock together. And going to have people that's going to recognize worldly things, regardless whether it comes in the form of a paint job or a sticker or any of the above. You're going to have people that's going to recognize these things, and they're going to brag about these things. And the reason why is because they themselves is filled full of worldly adventures. Worldly adventures. Once more, sinners love sinners. The ungodly love the ungodly. The wicked love the wicked. So because I recognize these things, I don't freak out like at one time I used to. You know, it used to really hurt my feelings, because if I had like an elaborate picture of the Lord on something of mine, and people didn't see it in the sense of the way that it should have been observed and respected, there was a time in my life that I was offended in that. But you know, I've learned, I've grown, I've matured, and I've learned to understand that it's only a few people like us that are going to be able to look at the cross, or tears coming from the Lord, or the crown of thorns, or him hanging on the cross, or him coming off the cross, or being resurrected on the third day. There's only a few of us that are going to admire those things a whole lot more than, let's say, a cartoon character, or a Superman figure, or some elaborate paint job or sticker. There's only a few of us that's going to understand the value of other things other than it being wild and freaky. Of course, in those people's eyes, whenever they looked at my car, it was weird. That was the weird car. I don't call it the weird car. I call it the love bug, because at the front of the windshield, above on top, it says love, L.O.B.E. It don't say lovely. It don't say loved. It don't say loving. It just says L-O-V-E, love. And I truly believe that that word has been so mischaracterized that today, when the younger generation looks at the word love, they actually see it in a completely different meaning in comparison to the way that my people looked at it whenever I was just knee-high to a grasshopper, or going back 50 years ago or and beyond, of the way that my ancestors looked at love towards the Bible, saying about agape love that there be no greater love than a man or a person lay down their lives for their friends, pertaining to the love for our military, the love for our patriotic duties. The town that I was just in, pertaining to CADIZ, was the very town that on 12/12/12, while me being incarcerated in Christian County, realizing or having a gut feeling that they was fixing to do something different on my particular case, I went ahead and bonded out. And the reason why I bonded out is because I know the way that the Commonwealth state of Kentucky is, that they actually don't have bondsmen in Kentucky. You can still make bond if you got the money to make bond, or if you're a citizen of Kentucky and you can put down a property bond, you can still get out and fight your case outside of Kentucky. But they was going to make it so difficult on me that there was going to be no way that I was going to be able to fight my case outside of Kentucky. And because of it, I took advantage of the situation and went ahead and bonded out, even though within 24 hours of me bonding out, I had found out from my attorney that they was very, very upset, and that they was possibly going to put out some sort of a warrant for my arrest, because they had risen my bond from $2,500 to $25,000. During the time that I was out, I had to prioritize things and get on a Greyhound bus and go from Tennessee to Oklahoma and talk to the individual that had been good enough to take my tools and my truck and all of my stuff and parking it behind his house and basically cover it up or bury it, hide it, to where nobody know it was back there but me, to the extent that the day that I got out, I went and got all that stuff. But I also knew that on my arraignment trial date, that I didn't need to come up here in my truck, because they wasn't playing with me. They was fixing to bury me. They was fixing to bury me to the extent that as soon as I walked into the courthouse with a friend there in Cydonia, Tennessee, by the name of Jimmy Gardner, that brought me up here, was good enough to bring me all the way up here. Within 2 minutes after we sat down in the courtroom, about 4 or 5 of them come up there with shackles and handcuffs and made sure that I was handcuffed and taken back to the back of the courtroom for further attention. It was then that my public defender come to my jail cell and said, "Dennis, they want you to go in for an examination. What do you think about that?" And I looked at Miss Fleming's, in which she was a public defender at that time, because her husband was a judge over in Christian County, and because it was a conflict of interest, they wouldn't let both of them work in the same county. I told her, I said, well, you know, they've already done pulled me through the mill pertaining to what happened in 2007 around the Kentucky Dam, towards the Paducah authorities arrested me and taken me to Four Rivers Behavior Center, and I checked out to be okay. Then, in 2010, whenever I come back to L.B.L, was whenever they slapped handcuffs on me, took me to Paducah, Kentucky, again, being arrested again by Paducah, Kentucky authorities. And that's whenever they told me that if I did not cooperate with them towards getting federal study done, that I could look forward to basically a federal rap of a Class E felony on my life. So now, within a 5-year period from 2007, along about June 2007, till 2012, 2012, which is a period of about 7 years. Now they're asking for me to go through another psychiatric evaluation. I told her, I said, I don't like it, don't appreciate it. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to participate in it. I kind of found it to be senseless, because I'd done already struck an A+ by a federal judge. I done pretty well struck an A or an A+ by Four Rivers Behavior Center. It's like, you know, what are they trying to prove here? I mean, I'd already went through 2 psychiatric evaluations, and every time it turned out to be good. Well, she come back a few minutes later. She goes, well, it don't matter what you think. They're ordering for a psychiatric evaluation to be done on you. I go, again? She said, yeah, again. She said, at this point in time, there ain't really nothing we can do until they get through looking at you and examining you, and they're going to take you to LaGrange, Kentucky, which is their state psychiatric mental health evaluation center, that I guess basically they take everybody to that is looking at some sort of a state charge. Not a county charge, not a federal charge, but a state charge. So I went, and within 24 hours of going there, though I was making good money and living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, taking care of myself, taking care of my needs, I was ordered to take Risperdal, a drug known of causing obesity, breast enhancement, that basically messes with a person's thyroid to the degree that it slows their metabolism way down, and the next thing you know, they start erratically, drastically gaining weight. So I went from 240 pounds to about 340 pounds in about 5 or 6 weeks while being incarcerated in Christian County. My bail was risen. Jimmy, at the time, as I talked to him afterwards, he said there was something really odd or different about that just did not feel right the way that they was doing you, because you come in there voluntarily. You knew when the date was towards you stepping back in front of Judge Woodall. You made it in plenty of time to basically prepare yourself to get prepped for court date. You was already in the courtroom. He said, I really didn't see the urgency of having to be sure that you was handcuffed like you was some sort of a villain, or that you was some sort of a person that was either out of his mind or dangerous to society. He said the way that they treated you was just uncharacteristic. Whenever you walked in that courtroom and sat down, he said once they identified that you was in there, it was almost like the clock stopped temporarily until they had you in handcuffs. And I said, Jimmy, you're absolutely correct. So it was basically right there in Trigg County where a group of people that had done already tried to bury me, that was working at the time in Land Between the Lakes. Since then, I think that they have retired. And I don't know for sure if Dwayne Camry lives in Trigg County or if he's even still living. That used to be the chief of police with law enforcement in the park ranger side. But I do know that Mr. Hawkins, and I believe his wife, is retired. And according to the paperwork that I received, that I wasn't even aware of at the time, live here somewhere in Trigg County. I don't know if they live in CADIZ. I don't know if they live around CADIZ. I don't know if they live close to the edge of another county. But according to the paperwork, they live in Trigg County. Now you may be saying to yourself, what is the sense of you going through these procedures and saying what you're saying? Well, just today I had a mission to complete towards taking an individual that once more is associated with investigating tactics up to Louisville, Kentucky, to get a Dodge Caravan that he had bought and that he felt like was a good deal, that he basically bought the day before, but he wanted me to take him up there to get the vehicle. So while I was up there, I decided to go visit a couple of the people that I used to work for in Louisville, Kentucky, pertaining to CADIZ auto body repair, collision repair. There's actually 3 facilities in the CADIZ name, SENN''S. Herman was the one that I was working under, one of the brothers that I went and visited, as well as another one of the brothers in another part of Louisville. And while I was in that close to Louisville, I went on up into Frankfort towards getting some recordings of actual documents that the state of Kentucky had basically registered and put out in regards towards what happened in the very county and in the very courthouse that I just talked to you about. Whenever I found out that you had to give $20, but it couldn't be in dollar form, it had to be some sort of a check, I'm thinking to myself, this is already starting out kind of different or weird. So I went ahead and I got the money order, and I come back and paid the And they looked it up, they looked it up, they looked it up, and they couldn't find the event that happened in Paducah, Kentucky of the arrest. They couldn't find the Murray, Kentucky, whenever the Murray, Kentucky police officers come to my campsite in Aurora, Kentucky, and shook me down with about 7 or 8 officers. None of that was in none of the paperwork. The only thing that was in my criminal background file in the state of Kentucky was the event that happened at and in CADIZ, Kentucky, in Trigg County. So, because of that, I felt like that it was necessary for me to make this information public towards after that I had read the paperwork, in which I'm sure the big column of paperwork that I had received originally from Miss Fleming's, that was, God, I know it had to have been, I don't know, probably 45, 50 pages deep, because there was so much of it, and because that I'm not that skillful in lawyer terminology, judge and lawyer terminology. I failed to recognize the fact that whenever I got to looking at this paperwork, in which I'm fixing to show you here momentarily, that after me staying up there for a period of almost 12 months over 2 telephone calls, Ms. Fleming's had the courts to redact my charges of 2 telephone calls of stalking in the 1st degree, to the point of dropping the stalking charges and redacting them to a misdemeanor, that even to this day I'm still trying to figure out, well, if it was redacted, okay, Frankfort, Kentucky, this is an official document that I picked up today, all right, that if these charges had been redacted, what did I actually stay in Christian County Jail for? Because you really can't justify the original federal charges towards interfering with a federal forest ranger. You can't really validate that, because there's nothing in here that says anything about messing with anybody's official duties. It wasn't listed as harassing, okay? But what it did do, okay, over here, if you look right over here, what it did do, it talked about the stalking charge right there as a felony, but then later it goes on into saying that the conditions, let me see here, let me get this right. That's talking about the rap sheet. Let me look up here. That's the same thing. It goes on and it talks about, hang on for 1 second, because this is important pertaining to me putting these pieces together. It goes on and talks about how that this file had been redacted. And if you look up the word redacted, what the word redacted actually means is that it was compromised. It was changed. It had been downplayed into basically a misdemeanor, which was no longer discussing the fact of stalking, because the time that I had spent in jail while they was toiling with me, they considered that enough time to consider all penalties paid. So as I'm reading this pertaining to these charges being redacted, I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's got the report date right here. Which is right there. There's the report date. July 11th, 2022. And then it goes on and talks about how that the charges had been redacted to a lower form in the state of Kentucky, and that the time had been served, and that I could go on about my business. Now, you may be saying to yourself, what has that got anything to do with anything? I'm going to tell you what it's got to do with. First of all, it's got to do with a group of people that never should have went all the way to Oklahoma over 2 telephone calls that was non-threatening, because I didn't violate any judge, number one. It's got to do with a group of people pertaining to Gary Hawkins and Lisa Hawkins and Dwayne Camry that was at that time working for Land Between the Lakes, that obviously wanted to destroy my life. But the other thing that it's got to do with is how that my attorney, when moving back to Tennessee in 2014, after my brother and I realized that we could not put our trust in Tommy Moore of the lower courts because of the way that Tommy Moore had basically given a free ride to individuals that took David down on his own property and took his own gun and put to his own head and tried to kill him, that the charges should have been once more attempted murder, the same thing that happened in my particular life in 1983 that was basically dismissed or annulled. Okay. Charges got thrown out even though it was a gun involved, a firearm. David said, because of that, we can't trust this guy. Let's ask this Mr. Bruce Brown, or whoever it was in Union City at the time, to take the court to a higher court. Well, I had no idea, first of all, that my brother was going to die, and second of all, I really thought that the charges that they had originally charged or accused me of was still on my file. And that's what Bruce Brown, and that's what the prosecuting attorney in Weakley County was judging this off of, to the point that me being a repeat offender fell under the guidelines towards it being a felony. Well, how can it be a repeat offender if the state of Kentucky dropped the charge and redacted it to the point that I was not on their books by saying I was a stalker? So one or two things had to happen. Either my attorney, out of ignorance, did not investigate the records for himself that was produced by the state of Kentucky, and the public prosecutor did not investigate the fact that the charges had already been redacted down to a misdemeanor, or the prosecutor was creating a bluff, hoping out of fear mongering and out of my own personal ignorance that I would go for it towards going ahead and agreeing to a felony over my brother and I being concerned about 3 little children. Like I said, I wasn't smart enough to catch that on the front end pertaining to those charges being redacted. Because if I had of, I would have already done brought this out to my case. But because I had recently got this paperwork today, I felt inclined to share it on my story. The fact of the matter is that, yes, the charges was dropped. It was reduced. Time served over 2 non-threatening telephone calls. And they was redacted, which basically means what I was being accused of, I was no longer being accused of. Which indicates to me what the prosecuting attorney and the judges was doing in Weakley County was by law against the law. Because I was not a repeat offender and never should have been categorized as being a felony to begin with. That's the point that I'm trying to make in my case. Because it was basically Tommy Thomas and his little compadres up there that was going along with the fact that I had been charged with stalking. Well, it's one thing to be charged, and it's another thing to be looked upon as being an actual stalker. I was not looked upon as being a stalker. It was downsized to a misdemeanor, and that it had been redacted. That's what the little piece of paper that I'm holding in my hand says. So by that, that's telling me that what the courts in Weakley County done to me personally by trying to think that I was a repeat offender was totally out of line, to the degree that it was basically illegal. And then if you'll combine that towards what the courts did not do that they should have done in making sure that that situation was settled with my brother and various neighbors before I ever come back in 2014, which obviously was not, to the point that now I got caught up in the middle of all this, not realizing basically what I was up against. So now we got a pattern of a group of people, either in Weakley County, or in Kentucky, or in Oklahoma, that act totally unprofessional and acted inappropriate in how that they was facing me, approaching me, in either hunting me themselves or allowing for me to be hunted. There's a pattern towards me being neglected, picked on, violated, demonized, or dehumanized ever since the miracle took place in my life in 1983, whenever the 2 hands miraculously come out of heaven that saved my life after me losing 9 units of blood and having a spleen removed. Ever since then, in every situation, not almost every situation, but in every situation, I have been falsely accused, hunted, to some extent provoked, or trying to be provoked, to the point of people trying to drag me down on the same level that they themselves was drugged down upon, towards being basically a bunch of, I guess you would call them hellraisers. And they thought that if they could raise enough hell in my life and in my brother's life, that eventually we would make a mistake towards taking the law into our own hands, and we would prove to the community that not only did we not have patience in performing professionally, but now we had been driven down to the same level that they was trying to drive us down to. And we didn't fall for it. My brother didn't fall for it. I didn't fall for it. And the courts basically sat back and allowed for us to be thrown to the wolves, to the extent that it had so much pressure, so much recourse on my brother, that I'll be thoroughly convinced for the rest of my life that what went on was a big contributing factor to his death. As far as I am concerned, to this day, there's various people that's going to give an account for the actions that occurred, as well as the actions that did not occur, that should have occurred, in regards to David Jeffrey Jackson's death. So what the court system is actually doing or not doing is just as perverted one way in what they are doing as what they're not doing that they should be doing. Now, whenever you have a country, a state, a county, a city that's being run this far out of proportion, that's whenever you'll see the judgment of God come in. That's whenever you'll see the great sorrows that the Bible talks about that will fall upon the humanity in the last days. That's when you will see God lift his precious divine hand of protection off of the masses, to the point that we see what we're seeing today in all the sorrows. It's really, really intensely sad. Like I said, I was sitting in CADIZ. I made a telephone call to the same person that I basically took today to get his van. Him and his wife, after me expressing to them a little bit deeper detail, because he basically listened to the court procedures in Paducah, Kentucky, of the federal judge pertaining to them trying to have me institutionalized. Because I guarantee you, if I'd have said the wrong thing to Dr. Dana during the time that I was in his presence, getting to talking about all this spooky stuff with the Antichrist, the one world government, Satan now being in the flesh, the New World Order, the opening of the seals, the two witnesses, what the courts was hoping for, or what the people that was engaged in this in the Land Between the Lakes was hoping for, is that they would have put me away and that I would have never, ever seen sunshine. Because that didn't happen to Four Rivers Behavior Center, because that didn't happen to Dr. Dana up in Chicago, they was dead set this time that they was going to make it happen. A matter of fact, I actually I finally wrapped my head around the federal court proceedings during the time that they changed the article of the charge, which was no longer based around premeditated murder, but now was based around threatening or interfering with a federal ranger. I got to thinking about that, and the reason why that Dwayne Camry was ticked off about that was because in 2007, whenever I'd been agitated and aggravated, my vehicle had been impounded, I'd had to go to Four Rivers Behavior Center, and then I had cops coming into my campsite towards wanting to check me out and analyze me and go through all my private stuff and my books and get up underneath my vehicle with flashlights and magnets, and really just bringing all kinds of false accusations and high drama into my life. I left that summer and went out to Denver, Colorado, but felt inclined of coming back to L.B.L. and finishing off the 40-day cycle of the ceremony, because I had only completed about 28 days 3-day cycle. So I called Dwayne Camry. I told Dwayne, I said, if that happens again on the level towards everybody coming up there in my campsite threatening me and tearing up all my books and tearing up all my stuff and not giving me any type of dignity or decency about who I am, I said, I'm telling you right now, God will strike whoever comes up there with bad, ill intent down to their death. That was given to me as a warning. That was given to me as a declaration. That was given to me as a notification or an advisory in trying once more to help Dwayne Camry and Dwayne Camry's law enforcement agency towards trying to make sure that no harm did come their way. And it wasn't that I had threatened them. I had never threatened Dwayne Camry or any type of law enforcement, including Mr. Barnes in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. But whenever you paraphrase something, that God is going to intervene by giving them a warning, and then they turn it around and say, no, this is not a warning, this is a threat. You threatened me. No, I didn't threaten you. You have not the ability to understand the difference between a threat and a warning. And that was whenever they initiated the problems that obviously Dwayne Camry had against me, and the reason why that they stood in front of that federal judge indicating that I had either threatened or pertaining to interfering with a federal ranger's performances or duties was based upon the malice that Dwayne Camry felt like that his case had not been treated thoroughly and fairly, not only by the Four Rivers Behavior Center, but now through the federal courts. And because he was still brewing, because he still had a monkey on his back, whenever I engaged in 2 telephone calls that was non-threatening, one to the administration and the other one to Gary Hawkins, that's whenever they put a scheme together towards filing federal charges against me, even though the federal charges that had been placed on my life was later handled in a state procedure. Who in God's name is going to drive 500 miles over somebody that has not threatened them? Unless there is a personal vendetta. Whenever you're talking about a group of people that had come together in a conspiracy, 2 or more is all it takes for a conspiracy, that was dead set towards wanting to ruin a person's life, and to think that now their little circle had expanded to Judge Woodall, the secretary, the people, the prosecuting attorney up here in their courtroom, to think that this little circle got that big towards trying to ruin my life of me spending almost a year in Christian County because of the Trigg County charges goes beyond anything that I can even begin to imagine. Because I treated them with respect and decency, but it was them that was not only not treating me with any respect or decency, but it was them the ones that was coming up to my campsite. It was them the ones that was trying to run me over while I was on my biking adventures. It was them the one that stopped me from preaching after me getting permission from the Illinois Land Between the Lakes Ministry in Southern Illinois. It was them the ones that stopped me from preaching what God had laid on my heart that Sunday morning to preach. It was them the ones that had formigated a lie towards trying to convince somebody that instead of me trying to warn them about electrical disturbances, that I was actually going to create or manifest the electrical disturbances. And then to top it all off, I come back to Wheaton County And the judge listened to my lawyer telling him that Mr. Jackson had not been properly informed about his arraignment. And then to think that the state prosecutor had mishandled the information to the extent that he actually thought that there was a stalking charge in Kentucky, even though it had been redacted down. I mean, it's one thing to be accused of something, and it's another thing for you to be prosecuted for that same charge, for that same accusement. If I was actually prosecuted for stalking in the first degree, the minimum is a year and the maximum is 5 years. Instead of me spending about 10 months in Christian County Jail, I'd spend at least a year for each telephone call if they would have been deemed as actual stalking. But because they was redacted, they was no longer looked upon or painted in that same image. A matter of fact, it was Tanya Flemings, my public defender, that went before the court system on the first day, accusing them of double jeopardy because I did not violate any order pertaining to the judge telling me that it was any longer than 2 years. So I had established and fulfilled my obligations that was ordered of me, and I fulfilled that order right down to the very last second, right down to the very last minute, right down to the very last day, right down to the very last moment that I was supposed to have fulfilled that order. So, was I dealing with a bunch of biased people that obviously had a vendetta, that obviously thought that by ruining my life the same as they ruined thousands of other people's lives up in L.B.L. and was going to get away with it? Am I supposed to just stand back and tolerate this and put up with this and not put up a struggle or a challenge or a fight myself? That's the reason why that I make the tapes that I make. That's the reason why I produce the material that I produce, is because I'm trying to put this message out there, hoping that somebody, that I can gain somebody's attention or somebody's ear in understanding that I am the victim in all this. I am the victim in all this, beginning in what happened in 1983 in Kenton, Tennessee, that exploded or escalated into what it did in 1991 towards them falsely accusing me of being an assassin, and then falsely accusing me of all these other accusations. So for me to be able to drive down the road, think about this, talk about this, record this, and still maintain a composure of myself, I feel like that I'm doing pretty daggum good. But yet, no, according to some of these people, they wanted to classify me as me being a lunatic or a madman. Or better than that, even a homegrown terrorist. So you can't tell me that the movement of what I'm talking about is not a supernatural, spiritual phenomenon movement, because it is. I haven't never done nothing to Dwayne Cameron. I ain't never done nothing to Lisa Hawkins. I haven't never done nothing to Gary Hawkins or any of the above pertaining to people in L.B.L. If I did, why didn't the charges come through way before the time that they come through in 2012? That's just it. They was made up. They was bogus. There's no doubt that that Gary Hawkins, like I said, I don't know if Dwayne lives in Trigg County or not. I think originally his people was somewhere down around Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But the way I understand it, I think Gary Hawkins come from eastern Kentucky, but Lisa Hawkins come from this area. So probably CADIZ, Kentucky is probably her hometown. she has a great deal of pride. She has a great deal of interest there. A matter of fact, before I went to CADIZ, I actually went to a ball game within about 2 miles of CADIZ, where they was out there having looked like a little league game going on. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, these people live their private lives, in which there's nothing wrong with that. They want to put on a facade that their town is old, and they're all about 1880s, pertaining to antiques and stuff, but yet no, they've got all these, or did have all these modern factories in their county, but yet no, they don't have a jail. So where's all the money going? And I know for a fact it was a few years ago, I don't know whatever materialized out of it, but there was 2 deputies that got caught messing around with a minor over here in Trigg County, and there's been some other charges that's come out of this area that was very, very worrisome, to say the least. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, those that are part of the pack, those that are in their little confined circle, they get reprimanded a little bit or chastised a very small amount. And some of them probably don't even get chastised at all. Once more, birds of a feather flock together. Jesus said that sinners love sinners, but what thank have they? Pertaining to them being hardcore, out and out conspirators, not conspirators, but bad people, manipulators, people that would rather steal from you than they would give to you. Now, there's no doubt that I'm sure Gary Hawkins, and probably his wife too as well, is trying to maintain some sort of a godly, decent, dignified image with the people that they care about and the people that care about them. Which, once more, if you get to looking at these little towns, there are certain people that's in control of those little towns. There are certain people that's in control of those counties. And the rest of the people ain't going to buck them, because if they do, then they're afraid that some of the freebies or some of the other stuff that they get to the sidelines will be cut off. But when is America going to understand and realize this is what has hurt us, and that this is what has stopped good, sound growth here in America, pertaining to the corruption, pertaining to the old money, pertaining to the old way of thinking, that this is the very thing that has stifled or stagnated not only our present, but also our future. That occurrences, just like I just got through talking about in CADIZ, Kentucky, goes on all over America. In some places, a little bit more predominant than they do others, depending upon whether or not you're in a rural area or whether or not you're in a big city like Memphis or Chicago or L.A. or New York City or Atlanta. When does it stop? I'm going to tell you when it stops. Whenever the people get enough of it. And whenever the people get ready to say enough is enough, and the truth comes out about all the corruption, about all these power players that basically abuse their authority by using these tactics, these evil, demonic, cruel tactics on regular old Joes like myself. Because like I told my son tonight, I said, I guarantee you it all boils down to me not having the proper money to hire good defense. Because if I would have had good defense, let's say Bruce Brown, right before my brother died, that good attorney would have been able to have submitted my case in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, you can't get this man for a felony, because the original charge was acquitted, or it was downplayed to a misdemeanor, which basically means that they did not have a full case towards going after me, towards me being a full-fledged stalker. Somebody must have thought about it and said, you know what, maybe we might need to leave this one alone. Maybe this one really is going to look bad in the eyes of the general public towards going after this individual over 2 non-threatening telephone calls, towards it being stalking in the first degree, and us actually giving him a year to 5 years for each telephone call. Somebody may have reevaluated that decision and looking at that towards saying, you know what, this is really going to look bad on us if we do this, because we really don't have substantial evidence to go with this towards burying Mr. Jackson with these 2 telephone calls. But yet no! The courts in Weakley County pursued that same momentum, using the same tactics towards going to bury Mr. Jackson, in the degree that will place a felony onto his life to make sure that he never ever can become a legal citizen to buy a legal firearm, because now we have stained him and branded him for life. We started out taking his sword from him in 1989, even though it was locked up into a case, even though it was not sharp enough to even cut almost hot butter. We're still going to pursue this individual to the point that we're going to basically shut him down. He's no longer going to be functionable in the public society. We may not can put him in a rubber room, fill him full of Thorazine to the point that he starts going around slobbering all over himself, but what we can do, we can unjustly put this felony on him and make sure that we stop him in his tracks. And not only are we going to stop him in his tracks, legally speaking, but we're also going to make him look like, in the eyes of his peers in Weakley County, Tennessee, that he's either a whack job or that he's a monster, and this is the type of treatment that he deserves. Now, if that's justice, this country is in big, big trouble. Because it would have been different if I was a moonshiner. It would have been different if I'd have got busted making drugs or selling drugs or taking drugs. It'd have been different if I was out here breaking into people's homes. It would have been different if I would have been a jewel snatcher or being caught on paper towards cheating the Internal Revenue Service or having some sort of a scam like all these other scammers that want to continue to keep calling people and getting their identity. It would have been different if I actually would have harmed or hurt somebody towards some sort of a homegrown terrorist attack. But none of the above has ever been a factor in my life. But yet now, the people that know me are still giving me the cold shoulder. They're still ostracizing me. They're still refusing to acknowledge the things that I'm talking about in the Bible is in fact defensible. And they're still refusing to make a move in the right direction. And you know, just the other day, whenever I went to visit a certain particular church in Union City, I ain't going to mention the guy's name, but you know, whenever I discussed that about his 2 compadres that come out to my automobile while I was on the opposite side of the parking lot doing some data work, and how that basically the law was called because the law come by there just kind of doing an observation, is everything all right? In his eyes and in his words was, well, we're not supposed to talk about that. Okay. So we're not supposed to talk about the church's problems, and we're not supposed to talk about the church's guilt. We're not supposed to talk about the politicians that has allowed for this to get in the shape that it's in for the past 30 plus years. We're not supposed to talk about the unparenting behavior behavior that has allowed for these heathens to become heathens the way that they are, towards basically raising up themselves without a father figure or a mother figure. We're not supposed to talk about the facts. We're only supposed to make up stuff that's nothing more than lies. Whenever you have a country or a state or a city or a community or a family that are living by these type of unordinary guidelines, then you have set a sail towards the destruction in that particular party group's life. And that's where we're at right now as a nation. And until we see it turned around, until we see a mighty movement of God, until we see an awakening, until we see people resubmit their hearts and their lives to the point that we can openly discuss these things professionally and promptly, I'm just afraid that whenever we get to looking at the droughts and the prices and the diseases and the wars and the flooding and the fires and all the above, that they're only going to continue to drastically, severely, sadly get worse. Redacted. I'll get it right in a minute. The charges was redacted to a misdemeanor. Time served. Mr. Jackson can go home. Okay? So if they was redacted, why did I spend almost a year in jail? Why did they go all the way out to Oklahoma to get me over 2 telephone calls? See, it doesn't make justifiable logical sense. And not only what various people working for L.B.L. done, but it doesn't make sense in what the state of Tennessee officials done, and them trying to finish me off themselves by putting a felony onto my life and finishing me off. Whenever you get to thinking about these people's powers that can do somebody like me at the age of 61, that can drive or allow for the community to drive his brother off into an early death at the age of 51, whenever you get to thinking about this that's happening right now in America to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, it becomes terrifying. Because not only have they failed us, not only are they not admitting to their guilt in failing us, but now they're playing it off and excusing it towards people still not being accountable for what has occurred, going all the way back 30 plus years ago by all them people that stuffed their pockets full, that's now living a good life while everybody else is suffering. When is the American people going to wake up to what the hell has happened and what the hell is happening? And if we let it go on, it's going to continue to happen. Thanks again for your time. I'm sorry if I have approached this situation in some sort of a negative way. I didn't mean for it to be negative. I'm kind of like my grandfather. If he walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. You know, sometimes it reaches a level of intolerableness pertaining to looking at the ugly that there's no other way to look at it other than it being ugly. Other than it being bad. Other than it being wrong. Other than it being unjust. Especially whenever now the circle of influences is no longer 1 or 2 people, but now there are dozens or even hundreds of dozens of people that has enacted in their actions towards the individual that's talking to you right now in some sort of way, in the same way. And if they didn't do it in one format, they done it in another. If they wasn't actually attacking me, they was sitting back and allowing for me to be attacked. Not only was myself being attacked, but my brother was being attacked. I got a dead brother over all this. It's not about the calluses that I put on my feet and on my hands towards going from church building to church building while they was all sniggering and making fun and demoralizing me and dehumanizing me. It wasn't about the money that I've spent towards trying to get this divine message out, that love is greater than darkness, that according to the Bible there is a promise of utopia and peace before the opening of the second seal, that one day that Satan will actually be handed a great sword. Thanks again for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. And as we end all the time by saying shalom, which means peace be with us all. Thank you for your prayers, and we're praying for you all towards these horrible, horrible, horrific things that has happened to not only me, myself, and I, pertaining to the founder of the Windmill Ministries, but thousands and thousands and thousands of others that have either been neglected, rejected, taken advantage of, or purposely left out in the cold towards being thrown to the wolves. It's time that we awaken. If we're going to awaken, it's time to have a revival. If there's going to be a true revival, it's time to do those things, because if not, we're seeing a ship that's sinking, and it's sinking quicker every day. It's getting worse and worse and worser, to the point that one day it's going to be the worstest. And if that's where we want to go, then continue to do what you're doing. Of course, putting your hands under your hips, remaining quiet, don't get in nobody's corner, stay out of sight and out of mind, be like that ostrich, take your head and stick it in the sand, and continue to keep hoping in one hand and poo-pooing in the other, and seeing which one's going to fill up the quickest, because I guarantee you it's going to be just like the Walmart slogan, coming near a neighborhood near you, pertaining to total chaos of our dollar, our communications, our love for one another breaking down, and us seeing what I'd rather not even discuss, that God has already showed me that's going to happen if we don't repent and turn from our iniquities, turn from our wicked ways. It's only going to be drastically that much more miserably, intolerably, horrifiably bad. Shalom. And thanks for listening.